Hello, my beautiful weird ones. Welcome to a bonus brew of Raven's Lorecast. Every now and then, magic needs an extra whisper, a side quest, or a spicy little detour. Consider this your unscripted moment with me. A shorter spell, a sharper truth, or just something I couldn't wait to share. Let's wander off the main path together. Welcome back, weird ones. If part 1 was the soft beginning, the stories of desire, touch, emergence, bodies rising out of darkness because they wanted to exist, then part 2 is the other half of the heartbeat. Creation isn't only longing, it's pressure, it's hunger, it's sacrifice, it's courage in the face of the unformed world saying, become, even if it hurts. Tonight, we step into the stories shaped by daring, by beings who tore themselves free from eggs too small, dove into waters too deep, stole light from the unjust, fell through worlds, bled themselves into existence, or shattered their own bodies to make room for life. This is the second chamber of the world's memory. Creation as risk, creation as cost, creation as the fierce act of becoming what you refuse to die without becoming. Creation as the fierce act of becoming what you refuse to die without becoming. Take a breath. Let's begin where even the gods weren't sure who created what. First, we return to the Indian subcontinent, to the oldest recorded questions humanity ever dared to ask. Long before humans learned to press sound into language, long before a spark became the first fire, long before any god had a name or a story or a worshiper, there was a hunger so ancient it didn't yet know itself as hunger. In the deep antiquity of the Indian subcontinent, in the oldest hymns preserved in human memory, the Rig Veda speaks of that beginning. The hymn is called the Nasadya Sukta, the hymn of creation, and it dares to open not with certainty, but with a question trembling in the dark. It tells us that in the beginning, there was neither being nor non-being. No sky, no water, no gods, no death, no immortality. There was neither existence nor non-existence, it says. Imagine that, my loves. A world so new that even opposites had not yet been invented. There was no light, but also no darkness. No sound, but also no silence. A cosmic in-between. A womb with no mother and no child yet forming inside it. And yet, something stirred. A warmth. A pressure. A pulse of desire rising like bubbles in deep water. This was tapas. Not fire, not flame, but creative heat born directly from longing. A yearning not to dominate, not to demand, but simply to be, to come into form, to move, to feel, to exist. This is the first hunger in the Rig Veda, the universe aching to know itself. From that heat came the first breath, slow, rolling, like the earliest whisper of wind across a world that has no edges. No deity spoke it, no mouth shaped it. It simply rose, a breath without lungs, a movement without body, a yearning without a name. Later traditions would call this the protoform of Prajapati, the creator principle who emerges elsewhere in the Vedas. But the hymn itself refuses certainty. It says, "The one breathed without breath, by heat," followed by the most radical question in ancient literature: who really knows? Who can declare it? Every other mythology claims to know the beginning. The Rig Veda looks into the dark and says, maybe not even the creator knows. That honesty feels older than stone, older than gods, more reverent than any decree. As the heat gathered and the first breath unfurled, a great swelling appeared beneath it. A cosmic sea, a deep, rolling potential that was neither water nor land, but the raw, humming substance from which everything would eventually rise. It moved like a slow tide, listening, waiting. This was the earliest echo of Vrita, the cosmic order, the pulse of the universe before the universe had learned to beat. As that sea expanded, as breath strengthened, as heat pressed harder against the waiting dark, form began to gather, quietly, naturally, like dew forming on the skin of dawn, not commanded, not sculpted, simply emerging because longing demanded shape. Only after desire had stirred, only after breath had moved, only after heat ripened possibility into becoming did the gods appear. The gods are later than the world's creation, the hymn says. Let that settle into your bones. The earliest Indian cosmology teaches that the gods did not make the world. Longing made the world. The gods came afterward. Creation is older than the beings who tried to explain it. And at the very end of the hymn, the poet does something no other ancient tradition dared. They shrug. He who is its overseer in the highest heaven, he alone knows. Or perhaps he does not. The hymn refuses to pretend. It refuses to lie. It refuses to claim that something so sacred, so vast, so intimate as the beginning of everything can be boxed inside certainty. Here is what the Rig Veda tells us. Creation is not a solved equation. Creation is a mystery animated by hunger, not hunger for power or perfection, but hunger for being, hunger for connection, hunger for meaning. The world began with desire so deep that even the gods bowed to it. Some people are taught that creation begins with certainty, a command, a decree, a cosmic "let there be." But the Rig Veda remembers something older and far more honest. The world began with longing, with warmth rising in the dark, with a breath no one taught, with a desire so ancient it didn't yet know its own name. You don't need certainty to create, my love. You just need hunger. That's what made the universe. Now we travel east to a story where the universe was an egg. And the first act of creation wasn't beauty, it was breaking free. In the beginning, before mountains rose like the bones of giants, and before rivers carved their silver paths across the land, the universe was held inside a single enormous egg. Not a delicate bird's egg, but a cosmic shell big enough to cradle existence itself. Inside it swirled yin and yang, darkness and light, softness and strength, stillness and motion. The twin forces of becoming turning over each other like restless dreams. The egg was a womb without a mother, a world waiting to hatch. And curled deep within that warm, swirling glow was Pangu, the first being. Pangu slept inside the egg for thousands of years, not peacefully, but with the agitation of someone growing faster than their container could bear. He stretched, he twisted, he pushed against the curved walls. He felt his ribs expand and his spine lengthen like a mountain range forming beneath his skin. Every day he grew bigger. Every day the egg pressed tighter. Every day he felt the ache of potential crowding his limbs until there was nowhere left to go. Have you ever lived in a life that once fit you but now feels too small? That was Pangu. And the world inside the egg whispered to him, "Wake up, break me, become." One day the pressure became too much. The egg held him like a second skin, tight against his chest, closing around his limbs, smothering his breath. Reaching into the swirling dark and light around him, he grasped something sharp. Not quite a tool, not quite a weapon, but an idea forged from his own need. He lifted it, and with a cry that shook the unformed world, he struck the inside of the shell. It cracked, then split, then burst open in a blinding rush of brilliance. Light exploded outward, darkness tumbled away, and for the first time, Pangu opened his eyes. Above him stretched the raw, soft sky. Beneath him, the heavy warmth of earth forming. The yang energy rose upward to become the heavens, bright and expanding. The yin energy settled downward to become the earth, cool and grounding. The world separated around him like lungs opening for their first breath. But it was unstable, new, fragile, threatening to collapse back into chaos. So Pangu planted his feet firm on the new earth and lifted the sky with his hands. He pushed upward and upward and upward until his arms trembled and his breath thundered through the newborn world. Each day, the sky rose a little higher. Each day, Pangu grew taller, his bones extending, his muscles thickening, his strength expanding to match the space he was carving open. He held the sky for 18,000 years. He pushed, he strained, he screamed, he sweated, and still he held it, because creation for him was labor, devotion, the ache to keep becoming. When the sky was finally high enough, and yin and yang had settled into harmony, Pangu knew his work was done. He laid his enormous body down, and the world was shaped from him. His breath became the wind. His voice became thunder. His left eye became the sun. His right eye, the moon. His blood flowed into rivers. His veins carved the valleys. His muscles became fertile soil. His hair became the forests. His bones rose as mountains. His marrow transformed into precious metals. His sweat fell as rain. Even the tiny creatures that crawled across his vast body became the small animals of the world. The world was not created for Pangu. It was created from Pangu. Born from the hunger that pushed him to break free, to stretch, to stand, to lift, to give everything his growing demanded. Creation was not an act of conquest. It was the natural consequence of being too big to remain small. We romanticize growth like it's peaceful, lotus petals and meditation bells. But Pangu reminds us what it really is: pressure, discomfort, cracking open the shell of a life that no longer fits. Creation begins the moment you admit you've outgrown what used to hold you. If the universe itself had to break an egg to exist, maybe you're not failing, my love. Maybe you're hatching. And now, from a giant who broke his shell to a trickster bird who refused to let the world stay cold and blind. Long before the Arctic winds carved ice into sculpture, before the tundra held the tracks of caribou or the warmth of a single hearth fire, the world was only darkness. A deep, endless dark so complete that even memory had no shape. There was no sunrise because there was no sun. No direction because there were no shadows. No color, no warmth, no horizon. Only a velvet black world where life stumbled blindly. People survived by touch alone. Animals moved like whispers through starless nights. Children were born and grew without ever seeing their mothers' faces. But in this world of darkness lived one being who could not settle for less than what the world might be: the raven. Not the raven flattened by trickster stereotypes, but the raven, the bringer of possibility, the raven, the transformer, the raven who felt the ache of what was missing deep in his bones. He felt it in his feathers, in the hollow beneath his ribs, in the restless pulse that told him there should be more. Not food, he could find that, but beauty, warmth, color, vision, fairness. A world where existence wasn't reduced to waiting in the dark. The raven hungered for light. One day, flying through the endless night, the raven caught a flicker, an unfamiliar glow seeping from the cracks of a small hut. A hut that should have been as blind and cold as all the others. The raven perched on the roof and listened. Inside lived a powerful man who had discovered a secret no one else could imagine. He possessed the light. Not metaphorically, literally. He had captured the light and sealed it inside a box, wrapped in hide and sinew, bound tight, guarded fiercely. He used it only for himself, hoarding warmth and sight while the rest of the world felt its way through darkness. The raven's hunger sharpened. Not envy, not anger. A hunger for fairness, for the world to be shared, for life to be more than stumbling and guessing, for a dawn that belonged to everyone. So the raven devised a plan, as all good ravens do. He transformed himself. shrinking, shifting, until he became a single black hair drifting gently into the hut through the smoke hole. Inside, he waited. He waited while the man warmed his hands beside the sealed box. He waited while the man's daughter entered to drink water, and when she leaned over her cup, the raven slipped inside her, not as harm, but as spark, as seed, as idea. The girl became pregnant, not strangely, not impossibly, but mysteriously, as though the universe had placed a purpose in her womb. In time, she bore a child with dark hair and bright, searching eyes. A special child, the raven reborn in human shape. The old man adored the baby, doting on him, playing with him, coaxing him with toys. And when the infant cried for the box holding the only light in the world, the old man relented, just to soothe him. Just for a moment. He loosened the bindings and opened the lid a finger's width. A finger's width was enough. A spear of brightness shot into the dark. The child laughed, reaching for it. The man slammed the lid shut, frightened by his own generosity. But the raven, rediscovering his hunger, cried for the box again and again until the man finally lost patience, lifted the lid, and opened it fully. In that instance, the raven shed the child's form. Wings burst from the infant body, feathers unfurled, and the raven rose, broad, magnificent, gleaming with determination. He seized the light, clutched it close, and shot upward through the smoke hole into the night the world had always known. He flew across the black sky, over frozen lands and silent sea, carrying the one thing that could transform existence itself. And with a single cry, the raven opened his claws and released the light. The world ignited. Mountains glowed gold, icebergs blushed pink, water shimmered with silver fire. The sky cracked open like a great blue shell revealing its hidden heart. People gasped as color rushed into their vision. Animals blinked and saw the edges of the world for the first time. Children looked into their mothers' faces and recognized love in shape, in light, in gentle expression. The raven soared above it all, watching the first dawn he had hungered for since the beginning. No god commanded him. No king demanded it. No law required it. Creation happened because the raven believed the world deserved better, and because he was brave enough to answer that hunger with action. The Inuit world doesn't begin with power hoarded. It begins with light shared. The raven wasn't punished for hunger. He followed it. He wanted warmth, color, fairness, beauty, and he dared to believe the world was worthy of them. So if your hunger whispers that things could be brighter, softer, kinder, listen. That's not temptation, my love. That's destiny. Next, we move to Turtle Island, to a story held by many nations, where the world begins not by force, but by generosity. In the beginning, long before forests stood tall or rivers carved their way across the land, before corn pushed green shoots from the soil or stories were spoken into firelight, there was a world above this one, a sky world, a realm of roots, rivers, soft gardens, and gentle light. Daylight without a sun, night without fear. Among the beings who lived there was a woman known simply as Sky Woman. She was curious, tender, and pregnant, carrying life beneath her heart the way a seed holds the memory of a future forest. One day she walked near the great celestial tree whose roots held the sky world in place. Something shimmered beneath it, something she had never seen. She leaned close, curious, listening for a sound she could almost but not quite hear. And the ground gave way. A hole opened at the base of the tree with a crack like a branch breaking under too much weight. Sky Woman slipped. Her feet lost the ground. She fell, not toward death or punishment, but toward possibility. Below the sky world, there was no land at all. No mountains, no soil, no place to stand or rest. Only an endless, shadowed ocean, breathing its slow, ancient rhythm beneath a sky with no horizon. As Sky Woman fell, the beings of this water world looked up and saw her glowing figure descending, softly, slowly, like a leaf drifting from the tallest canopy. The birds were the first to react. Loon, heron, duck, swan. They felt her hunger before she even reached them. The need for safety, for ground, for a place to land her unborn child. Without hesitation, without asking who she was or whether she deserved help, they rose. Wings pounded the air. Feathers sliced the wind. Together they flew up in a whirl of motion, weaving their bodies into a living net. They caught her, gently, carefully. No one bird was strong enough to bear her weight, but together they carried her down, down, down toward a world that had no land to offer her. The water animals saw what the birds had done, and they gathered. Otter, beaver, sturgeon, and turtle, ancient, steady, and wise. Sky Woman lay cradled on the birds' backs, her hair drifting around her like a cloud of night, her hands cupped protectively over the life inside her. The animals looked at her and felt her need as though it were their own. Turtle spoke first. We must make a place for her. But there was no earth anywhere, only the dark mud resting far below the water's surface. Someone would have to dive. Beaver went first, strong and tireless. He plunged into the deep, but he never reached the bottom. Loon went next, graceful and determined. She dove until her lungs burned, returning with nothing. Otter, fast and agile, disappeared into the blackness, only to rise gasping and empty-handed. The animals trembled. The water trembled. Sky Woman waited, silent, trusting, her belly round with the child who would inherit this world. Then a small creature stepped forward. Muskrat. Soft, unassuming, easily overlooked. But Muskrat dove without hesitation. Down he went, deeper than any of the others. Down through darkness thick as sleep. Down through water cold as winter breath. His lungs screamed. His paws bled. His tiny heart thundered. And still he dove, refusing to turn back. When his body finally rose to the surface, limp, unmoving, carried by the mercy of the water, his small clenched paws held a single clump of mud. Dark, cold, sacred. Muskrat had given everything to bring it forth. The animals placed the precious mud onto Turtle's broad back. Turtle offered himself without hesitation, steady as the first promise the world ever kept. Sky Woman bent down, slowly, reverently, and spread the mud across Turtle's shell. As she did, she began to sing. The song rose from her like warmth rising from a hearth, gentle, steady, alive. The mud responded. It stretched, thickened, grew. Hills curled upward, valleys sank. Rivers wound their paths, mountains lifted their ancient shoulders, plains unfurled. It became Turtle Island, the land that would one day be called North America. Sky Woman stepped onto the earth created for her, and in gratitude she danced. Wherever her feet touched, seeds she carried from the sky world fell into the soil. Plants sprouted in her steps. Flowers opened at her heels. Corn and squash and beans rose from the ground as if they remembered her even before they met her. Life blossomed because a world of water made room for her, and because one small creature gave everything so she could land safely. Her child, the firstborn on Turtle Island, carried that lineage of gratitude and reciprocity into every generation that followed. Sky Woman didn't fall into punishment. She fell into care. A whole world caught her. The Haudenosaunee remind us that creation is not held together by force, but by kindness, by cooperation, by sacrifice freely given. And sometimes the smallest one, the one no one notices, is the one who brings up the mud that becomes a whole damn continent. And now we visit the cold north again, to a story where creation demanded a god's entire body. In the beginning, before the sagas carved runes into memory, before gods walked the 9 realms, before even the idea of order existed, there was a great, yawning emptiness called Ginnungagap, a void so wide and quiet it felt like a held breath that lasted forever. On one side of that emptiness lay Niflheim, a realm of ice, mist, and cold thick enough to sting. On the other side burned Muspelheim, a realm of fire and sparks that hissed with unbearable heat. And between them, between freezing stillness and roaring flame, something impossible began to happen. Heat drifted into the ice. Ice drifted into the heat. The edges of both realms softened. Frost began to melt in great trembling drops, and from those drops, born of tension, not harmony, rose the first being, a giant shaped from the collision of extremes, raw as a star still forming, enormous enough to fill the void with his breath. His name was Ymir. Ymir was not a god. He was older than gods. He was the first pulse of life stirring in a cosmos that had never known life at all. His body sweated with creation. His breath steamed storms. As he slept, new beings dripped from his limbs, frost giants with strange shapes and stranger hungers. Life poured from him unasked, uncontained. Near him wandered a great cosmic cow named Audhumla, her breath warm and steady as she licked the salt-bright ice for sustenance. From her milk, Ymir drank and grew even larger. As she licked day after day, her tongue revealed something hidden deep within the ice. First a shape, then a face, Then a whole being emerged like a memory thawing. This was Buri, the first god. Buri fathered Bor, and Bor fathered 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve, who rose tall and sharp-minded in a world still half chaos. These young gods looked at Ymir, whose vast body sprawled through the void, and they understood something terrible and true. As long as Ymir lived, the world could not take form. There would be no land to walk on, no sky to breathe under, no place for anything new to root or rise. Creation itself was trapped inside him. And so the brothers made a choice so heavy it changed the shape of existence. They confronted Ymir. The battle was not poetic. It was not clean. It was not righteous. It was necessary. Ymir's fall shook the empty cosmos, and when he died, his blood poured out in a flood so great it drowned nearly every one of the earlier beings. His body, once overflowing with unshaped possibility, became the raw material from which the brothers built the world. They used his flesh to form the earth. They used his bones to raise the mountains. They used his teeth to scatter stones along the land. They used his blood to fill the seas. They used his skull to shape the sky. They used his brain to form the clouds drifting above it all. And from his eyebrows they built a protective ring, a boundary to shelter the realm of humans, which they would call Midgard. The world was formed from a body, warm, remembering, ancient. And though the gods shaped it, Ymir's essence remained. Every gust of wind carries a trace of his last breath. Every trembling in the mountains is his old strength shifting. Every tide against stone is his blood still moving. Ymir did not disappear. He transformed. Everything that lives now lives upon him. Some creations come from love, some from longing, some from hunger, and some are costly. The Norse didn't shy away from that truth. Their world stands on the body of someone who came before, someone who gave everything, willingly or not, so something new could exist. Not all sacrifices are clean. Not all beginnings are gentle. But every mountain and wave reminds us even endings can hold the seed of creation. From a giant's body becoming mountains and rivers, to a universe kept alive only because the gods bled for it. In the time before this world, according to the Mexica, the universe had already lived and died 4 times. Each age, each sun, rose, shone, and eventually fell, consumed by disaster or imbalance. And when the 4th sun died, the world was plunged into darkness so complete that even the gods felt fear. There was no warmth, no growth, no rhythm to the days, only the weight of a night that would not end. So the gods gathered at Teotihuacan, their faces flickering in the glow of a sacred fire, knowing that someone among them would have to give everything in order to ignite a new dawn. At the center of their gathering roared a great bonfire, the fire of becoming, the fire that could make God into a son. But the cost was terrible. Whoever stepped into that fire would lose their body, their name, their identity. They would burn forever, devoured by their duty. The gods asked, who will offer themselves? Who will become light for a world that cannot live without it? 2 stepped forward. The first was Texistecatl, radiant, adorned with jade and feathers, bracelets of gold clinking against his wrists. He was powerful, proud, and certain the honor belonged to him. The second was Nanawatsin, humble, small, his skin covered in sores. He wore no jewels, only simple paper garments. No one expected him to stand beside a god as glorious as Texistecatl, but he did. The gods prepared them for the trial. Texistecatl was dressed in shimmering finery. Nanawatsin was clothed in reeds and ash. The fire rose higher. Sparks leapt like hungry spirits. Texistecatl approached first. He stepped toward the flames. Heat lashed his skin. Pride faltered. He stepped back. He tried again and again. 4 times he approached the fire. 4 times he failed. A murmur rippled through the divine assembly. Then Nanawatsin stepped forward, quiet, trembling, braver than anyone realized. He whispered a prayer, one last breath of himself, and then he ran. He hurled his small, aching body into the fire without hesitation. The flames swallowed him whole, roaring with approval, and a great shockwave burst across creation. When the gods shielded their eyes and looked upward, a new sun, brilliant, blazing, impossibly bright, was rising into the darkened sky. Nanawatsin had become Tonatiuh, the 5th sun. Shamed, Texistecatl threw himself into the fire afterward, but because he surrendered second, his light was pale beside Tonatiuh's brilliance. He rose in the sky as the moon, dimmer, cooler, forever reflecting the radiance he was too afraid to claim. But Tonatiuh did not move. He hung suspended above the world, burning but still. The gods pleaded, "Why will you not travel across the sky?" And the new sun answered, "I have given everything. Now you must give too." For in the Mexica understanding, creation is not a single sacrifice. It is a contract, a reciprocity, a shared cost. So the gods offered their own blood, their own hearts, their own breath, feeding Tonatiuh so he could begin his journey. Only when nourished by divine sacrifice did the sun move across the sky, pulling life forward, marking time, warming earth, awakening corn from the soil. And from that day on, the cosmos was bound together by a truth older than any calendar stone. The world continues only through offerings. The sun shines because someone gave themselves to make it so. The Mexica didn't believe the world was held up by perfection. They believed it was held up by courage. Nanawatsin wasn't the strongest or the most beautiful. He was simply the one who stepped into the fire when everyone else hesitated. Creation didn't choose him. He chose creation. And maybe the truth is this. Sometimes the brightest light comes from the ones who've been overlooked the most, until the moment they leap. Now we go to the ancient Celtic lands, where the world begins with a woman, a well, a mistake, and a river that refused to die quietly. Long before Ireland was Ireland, before Ogham lines carved stories into standing stones, before the hills hummed with the footsteps of the Tuatha De Danann, before sunlight found its way through solstice chambers, there was a goddess whose name lingers in mist and memory, Danu. She was not just a mother of gods. She was the pulse beneath rivers, the whisper in the well springs, the breath in the other world. And from her essence grew the source of all wisdom, a sacred well called Sagus, hidden in a realm just beside this one, the way a dream sits beside waking. Around this well grew 9 hazel trees, their branches heavy with shining nuts so bright they looked like drops of sunset made solid. When each nut fell into the water, knowledge rippled outward, pure, shimmering, potent enough to change whoever touched it. In the depths of the well swam a great salmon, sometimes called Fintan, who ate the fallen nuts and became the salmon of wisdom, glowing with truths far older than any mortal tongue. The well was guarded fiercely, because in the Celtic imagination, wisdom was never free. Knowledge demanded cost. Truth demanded transformation. And anyone who approached the well of Sagus did so knowing they might emerge changed or not emerge at all. Boan, a goddess of inspiration and fierce curiosity, lived near Bruna Bonye, the ancient mound humans later built into the passage tomb now called Newgrange. She had heard the warnings. She knew no one could circle the well of Sagus without facing its truth. The hazels whispered caution. The salmon stirred. The water trembled. But Boan wanted to know, not from arrogance, not from greed, but because truth calls to some hearts the way the tide calls to the moon. So she stepped toward the forbidden well. She circled it widdershins, against the sun, against tradition, against fear. And with each step she took, the well rose. First a shiver, then a surge, then a flood of water bursting upward as if the truth had grown tired of being contained. The waters struck her, fierce with revelation, rushing around her legs and waist and chest, filling her with knowledge too vast for a single body to hold. They wounded her. They changed her. They branded her with understanding. And as she fled, trying to outrun the rising flood of knowing, the waters chased her. Where she ran, water followed. Where she stumbled, it surged. Where she reached the open land, the well's flood carved its path into the earth. The river that spilled behind her, wild, luminous, unstoppable, became the river Boyne. And in that river lived her story, how she sought truth, paid the price, and became part of the land itself. The Boyne flows wide and bright, not because a god commanded it, but because a woman dared to learn what the world tried to keep hidden. In Celtic telling, creation is not just birth. It is sacrifice. It is offering. It is courage wrapped in consequence. Danu gives the hazels, Bowen gives her body to shape the river. Fintan transforms to hold the wisdom. Nothing sacred comes without cost, but what is gained is greater than what is lost. The Celts knew a truth we forget. Wisdom isn't a prize, it's a transformation. Bowen didn't approach the well to boast. She approached it because her soul needed truth more than safety. And yes, it changed her. Yes, it cost her. But it also carved a river that still nourishes the land today. Some wounds don't break you, my bright ones. Some wounds become rivers that carry your story farther than your feet ever could. And finally, we end part 2 on the western edge of North America, in a story shared by many nations, each with its own sacred telling, but all carrying one truth. The world survives because of reciprocity. In the beginning, along the fog-wrapped shores of the Pacific Northwest, before cedar bent into canoes, and before smoke curled from long house fires, humans wandered hungry across a world that had not yet offered them the knowledge of how to live well upon it. They scraped shellfish from rocks and dug for roots with aching fingers, but hunger gnawed at them, deep and relentless. Winter fell heavy. Children cried. Elders weakened. The people whispered into the wind and water, "Who will help us? Who will feed us? How do we survive in a world so cold, so vast, so full of powers we do not yet understand?" Far beneath the surface of the sea, in a world that mirrored our own but shone with its own sacred light, lived the salmon people. In their realm, they looked like humans, tall, graceful, wearing shimmering robes that rippled like sunlight underwater. They lived in villages, raised children, held ceremonies, and watched the humans with compassion stirring in their chests. They saw the hunger, they saw the fear, and they said amongst themselves, "They will not survive unless someone helps them. We must give of ourselves." But this help would come at a cost. To feed the humans, one of the salmon people would have to give up their body, cross the veil between worlds, and offer themselves as food. This was not a punishment. It was a sacred responsibility, a gift that created a bridge between the worlds. The chief of the salmon people asked, "Who will go first?" From among them stepped a young salmon, humble, bright-eyed, and determined. "I will go," he said. "Feed them with my body. Honor me when you eat. Return my bones to the water, and I will find my way home. If they do this, we will return year after year." So he shed his shining robes, transforming into the sleek, silver form humans would one day know. He swam through the veil, across saltwater and river mouth, until one day the starving humans saw a flash of silver cutting through the shallows. They caught him gently, almost reverently, sensing he was no ordinary creature. And when they prepared him as food, they remembered his instructions whispered into their dreams, to treat him with care, to share his body equally among all, and to return his bones to the river so his spirit could go home. They did exactly that. They honored him. When he returned to the salmon people's world, no longer in the form of a fish, but restored to his spirit body, he told them, "They honored the gift. They cared for my bones. They shared me. We can help them." And so the next season, the salmon people transformed by the thousands, taking on the silver-bodied salmon form, swimming through the vale and up the rivers. They filled the streams with their bodies, flashing, leaping, determined. Their backs bent against rapids. Their sides glowed with sunset colors. They offered themselves so humans could live. And the humans received them with gratitude, with ceremony, with respect. Over time, this covenant became law. The salmon people would return each year if humans honored the gift, shared the catch, returned the bones to water, and never took more than they needed. Life continued because both sides held the relationship sacred. The salmon people died so humans could live. Humans honored their death so salmon could return. Creation here was not a single event. It was a cycle, a relationship, a reciprocity older than any written word. We give to you, you give to us. That is how the world continues. In the Pacific Northwest Coast traditions, food is not a resource, it's a relationship. The world survives not because something is taken, but because something is honored. The salmon people didn't just feed humanity, they taught us how to live in reciprocity instead of extraction. The world keeps turning when we remember the covenant. Take a breath with me. In part 1, creation rose from longing. In part 2, creation rose from hunger, pressure, sacrifice, and courage. Across every continent, across thousands of years, humanity kept telling itself the same sacred truths in different forms. Becoming costs something. A shell has to crack. A god has to tear themselves open. A bird has to steal fire or light. A woman has to fall. A giant has to die. A goddess has to overflow. A salmon has to offer its life. A people have to choose reciprocity over greed. Creation is not passive. Creation is not tidy. Creation is not polite. Creation is an act of courage, a decision to rise even when the world tries to collapse back into darkness. And that, my bright ones, is why these stories matter. Because every single one of them whispers a lesson straight into your bones. You are supposed to hunger. You are supposed to push. You are supposed to ache. You are supposed to transform. You are supposed to choose yourself. You are supposed to become. And if anything in these stories stirred something ancient in you, if you felt a heat, a pressure, a spark, a remembering, it's because it was always yours. That's our little detour, loves. Thank you for slipping into this bonus moment with me. If it stirred something, tell a friend. That's how our circle grows. You know where to find me, at Ravenslorecast, pretty much everywhere, and at Ravens_lore_cast on Instagram and Threads. Until next time, from the home of wit, wisdom, witchcraft, may your magic stay curious.